I'm doing a video on, as we've said before, the Marilyn Manson case and the Arnie Hammer case, and I'm reading through some of these accounts of alleged victims of Arnie Hammer and Marilyn Manson. One thing I wanted to do to qualify from the last video, I actually did like a 45-minute or something video, actually going over the next person that I'm going to read and the person that I was just reading previously. And I realized that I wasn't live. So I had all this great stuff that I brought up. Hopefully I'll be able to remember it as we go along. But essentially, you know, I'm always gonna feel a bit awkward because I'm gonna be like, oh, I know there was something I said that really clarified my point here. But because I've read ahead and I know some of the severity of what they're gonna say, it's gonna be harder for me to read it off the cuff and do a kind of reaction that is wholly, reacting at the time to each specific allegation. I wanted to also clarify quickly before why I'm doing this, and I think it's really, really important. I think there's a lot of guys right now who are very, very apprehensive towards the Me Too movement, and I want to use this as a platform to speak about why certain men are so apprehensive and what is the nature of certain types of allegations and certain types of things that come out in social media that worry men so much, where they get worried about the implications of somebody being able to essentially just put out into social media space allegations that have happened towards them without a due process before being cancelled or being becoming a social pariah, essentially, which is going to happen. I'm sure Marilyn Manson and probably Arnie Hammer have had to close down their social media essentially because it's just full of hatred from women. Now, I'm not saying that they don't or men as well who are offended by what they did. Now, I'm not saying they necessarily don't deserve that, given some of the gravity of the of some of these allegations, but I think the process is important, and I believe that really we have to make sure we keep drumming it into people's heads. You are still innocent. You are protected by a veil of innocence until going through a legal system or a formal investigation, which then shows demonstratively that you are, likely guilty of the offence, right? I also wanted to just clarify quickly before, because I'm going to touch on this later, about the process of even sharing on social media, because I think to a certain degree, I just wouldn't even do this, like go on social media. But the problem is that, with a lot of, and I wouldn't go on it for, to accuse someone, because I believe so firmly in the due process. But the problem is that believing in the law and the law actually working for you, especially against very powerful men, is something that the law has made problematic, so that women have to do this to be able to get out there, and they have to do this to be able to warn other women against, dangerous men. But I think it would be preferable that the law is fixed so that women really do feel confident that if they come forward with these kind of allegations, that there is a process that they can believe in, and that, if the evidence is there, that they will get justice. But too much of the time, the lawmakers and the legal system protects men in the way, especially powerful men, to such a degree that it's very hard for these women to get justice other than, mob justice, which is essentially what social media is. Last clarification, because I think this is important before I forget, that the problem with this mob and social media type of, attempts at getting justice against such dangerous men is that all too often it seems to me that women can come on to social media, read another woman's account of an allegation against a man, and this might be a man that they have some personal issue with, that he was an asshole to them, but hasn't actually done anything illegal to them, and they can word things in a particular way to make the person feel terrible. They can read the accounts of other women to make their accusations in line with these other women, and therefore it can be used in a trial, essentially as if these are just normal witnesses to a crime. Now, in the criminal justice system, usually, for instance, I'll give you a great example. When you're doing a lineup of potential suspects for a crime, and the police do a police lineup, is it any of these men? Witnesses, if a witness or a victim is sitting in the police station, and one of the people who is a suspect walks into the police station in handcuffs, that and the victim sees them, right, and then points them out in a line, that becomes null and void. You can no longer use that as an objective witness statement because their perception of that individual has been tainted. In the same way that, what you really want to do is get separate accounts from women who haven't had any communication with each other. You ensure that they don't talk to each other, so that what they're saying, right, isn't something that a defense lawyer can then come forward and say, well, they basically were able to collate their different accounts and essentially make them consistent with each other, right? Because that's what I would say as a defense lawyer. Look, they've had their accusations online. It's very easy for another woman to have looked at this online account and read the person's account, and then got her accusation to match what other women had previously said, right? So I would say you can't use that witness. I'm sorry, that's prejudicial towards my and violates the rights of my client. As a defense lawyer, I would say that, and I think really that should be the law. You shouldn't be able to do that, and that's the problem with putting these things up on social media. I understand that these women definitely deserve the chance to be able to be heard and put out there, so that they feel some kind of support system when these things happen to them. But there is the problem of that. So what I would say is should be general information that is out there for women who have suffered this kind of stuff, these horrid, things happening to them, that they should go to a lawyer or go to a police station, make a statement that is notarized and witnessed either by the police officer or by a separate lawyer. Write out everything, the full account, every detail of what happened, right? And then you put that all away, envelope it, put it somewhere, say no lawyer can come back and say, that you looked at other people's accounts online or anything like that. But you have essentially come up with what happened in full detail by yourself, and that can be used to back up your testimony at court. I think that's such an important thing that needs to start happening. And what it does is not only does it protect the rights of the accused, but it also gives them very, very little wiggle room to squirm out of, of the accusations if all the accounts of different women match that have been separately taken prior to them putting anything online. And then once a court case or they decide to do a court case or a criminal case or even a civil case against the accused, then they cannot speak to each other. They can't talk to each other. If you find out that they've contacted each other, that they've had a phone call, that they've had dinner, they're out as witnesses. And that you should be very, very strict about that, because what it does is it benefits the defense by them being able to say, look, they had long 2-hour, 3-hour conversations, enough time for them to be able to get a consistent story together to make up about my client, and it violates his rights, right? And furthermore, just to give an example, there was the Michael Jackson case where these two men came out and said Michael Jackson then abused them when previously they had said he hadn't. But they had time to look at each other's accounts and shape it so that their stories really match. I think that's highly unfair to do. Let's get on with the rest of this allegation, because this gets much, much worse very, very quickly. But I'm going to try and keep it, read it line for line and play a little bit of devil's advocate. But now I know that the accusations get very, very serious. I just want to make that clear before I do go on to play devil's advocate, so you don't just think I'm being cold or facetious. I'm playing devil's advocate because I want to show, how, you can put out these accounts online and make these accusations online in a way that, these anti-SJW men, or just men who are genuinely terrified that this could happen to them, that some woman that they've been an arsehole to, or that they didn't like them anymore, or that they cheated on, can just come online and make some story and ruin their lives, essentially. So, a year or so later, our professional relationship, let me put it like that. So this is the account that was by the Instagrammer. I'm trying to find them. Oh, Ashley Walters, by the Instagrammer Ashley Walters. A year or so later, our professional relationship ended. I already said about this professional relationship. This was a romantic relationship, not and sexual relationship, not a professional relationship. She doesn't need to pretend that everything that happened was a manipulation, because if he violates her and does something illegal, it doesn't matter if you were in a romantic relationship. That does not give him the right to then abuse you. It just doesn't. So I don't know if it was a lawyer who told her to call it a professional relationship, but it makes it triggers men and makes it feel suspicious when you look at language like that. He continued to harass me and smear my reputation for months. He threatened my financial security. Okay, so I said about this that, in my previous video, that he threatened my financial security. Now, if I break up with someone, if I'm a business, like say I'm a business owner, and I have a business partner who I end on bad terms with, and they have business contacts and connections that are connected to my company that, I know that I can push my weight around and say, hey, I don't want you to do business with them. Otherwise, you're not doing business with me, right? That is not, that's an asshole move, and I probably wouldn't do it personally. But nonetheless, in terms of if you're getting business contacts through knowing Marilyn Manson. Uh, yes, Marilyn Manson. Sorry, not Charles Manson. Marilyn Manson. You've gained all this, by entering into his circle. You've gained business contacts, and he now doesn't like you anymore. He can be an asshole and say, I don't want you. I don't want you. I don't want you working with her. I don't like her anymore. And yet, that's terrible, and it's an asshole move. But does it make it that he should be cancelled and studio should be dropping him from their label and that kind of stuff? That worries me. That kind of, and I know that abusive men try and control the finances of women that they're going out with. That's a major tactic of abusive men, to control the finances so that they feel that they cannot escape them. So I understand that element of it, but nonetheless, it is so important when you're putting these things online. I think, especially, maybe you don't care about the reception of men, but if you want men as allies in your, to say, yeah, this guy is genuinely horrible, I think it's really, really important to make sure that you detail the implication of this, that he threatened my financial security so that he could continue controlling me, or so or he threatened it in a way that made it very difficult for me to leave him, or something along those lines, so that we know the reason why you're saying this. You're not just saying he was being an asshole. This is part of the picture of the continued abuse that he was doing towards you. You might say, oh, that's obvious, but it isn't necessarily obvious. So it's important to make sure you clarify, I think, exactly what is meant by each stage of the abuse that you're outlining. By then, I've grown close with several of Manson's bandmates, girlfriends, and friends. I witnessed them at their own stage of having their world controlled by him and his abusive antics. Okay. Whether it was through charm or coercion, so at least he's admitting that it's sometimes charm or coercion, it wasn't at all unusual for any of us to get sucked back in. It took me a long time to fully realize the process and process the trauma I went through and witnessed. My very first panic attack occurred while working there. I continued to suffer from PTSD and struggle with depression. Now, this particular allegation you're going to see a few more times, and this is why I wanted to highlight earlier that it's so important, because it is true that abuse victims do suffer from PTSD. They do struggle with anxiety attacks, and they do struggle with depression. But you're going to see this accusation mirrored every time. I think it was even mirrored in, Evan Rachel Williams Evan Rachel Woods didn't say this, I don't think. Started grooming me as a teenager, brainwashed. I am done being free with retaliation, slander, or blackmail. I need to expose him dangerous and call out industries that have enabled him before he ruins more lives. I stand with the victims. Okay. So anyway, you'll see this particular thing of PTSD come up a lot of the time, and it could be used by a shrewd defense lawyer to say, well, it's kind of funny how this wording seems almost exactly the same, almost like you could cut and paste each time they allege certain things into each other's things. Now, this could be because they all experience the same thing. But if you're giving the benefit of the doubt, because it's the burden of proof is on the prosecution, and your client is innocent until proven guilty, you could argue, and I think rightly so, that maybe the reason that the wording is so similar is because they read other people's accounts first and kind of copied it, hoping that if it matched, it would strengthen their case. So as we all struggle, the survivors do, to get on with our lives, I keep hearing stories disturbingly similar to our own experiences. it became clear the abuse he caused. He continues to inflict on so many, and I cannot stand by and let this happen to others. Brian Warner needs to be held accountable. So again, playing devil's advocate here, as we all struggle as survivors do to get on with our lives, I keep hearing stories disturbingly similar to our own experiences. As soon as this happens, as soon as you hear a story, it's very, very important, I think, for you to separate and say, okay, he abused me over here. He abused me over here. What we need to do is not talk to each other about it. Go to a lawyer, right? Explain that that all you have spoken about is that. I'd even maybe record the conversation. I don't know, but like, just say, look, we did speak about it. That insofar as we said to each other that he, I think he abused me, and I think he did certain things, but we haven't talked to each other about the details. Now we want to give a statement, right, like to a lawyer, so that we can't be impeached on the idea that we've all concocted this story up together as women who were disgruntled because Marilyn Manson broke up with them, or Marilyn Manson cheated on them, or something like that. I think that's so important. Don't, because the law does allow women to come together, discuss with each other the abuse of a single. If you want to go to a place where several women have been abused, but by different perpetrators, so that you have a support group, that's fine. But if you're coming together as people who have mutually been abused by Marilyn Manson, and you're allowed to sit there and discuss it, and say, oh, he did this to me, and then she says, oh, he did the same thing to me, that becomes null and void, because you've potentially influenced the testimony of somebody else. Even if you're telling the truth, you don't know for certain that the other person is telling the truth. You have to. The other person might be in it for money, or the other person. More than likely, they're not. But it could be the case that they're in it for more cynical reasons. So it's so important, I think, get those separate accounts, right? And don't start talking to each other. If you really, really need support, go to a support group. I think, this sounds like I'm mansplaining, and I hope it doesn't come across as that. I'm just saying that is what I want to hear in these accounts. That I want to be able to see at the end that I have not like right at the end, a disclaimer. I have not discussed my my experiences with any other Marilyn Manson abuse survivors. So I have not discussed it with any other Marilyn Manson abuse survivors. This account is my account that I have come up with without the influence of anybody else, except my own experience. And finally, I think what would be important is that I have a statement that I have already given that is dated. I'm not saying the exact legal terminology that one ought to use, but just in general, what I want to hear at the end of these accounts is that I have made a statement to a lawyer that is dated to ensure that the legal process is fair and unbiased, going forward. And this now I have come online to share my experiences, right? I think that's so important. And I honestly think it should go so far as to check women's devices, like the accuser's devices, to see if they've gone online to read other people's accounts, see if their history shows that they ever searched for Marilyn Manson abuse and were able to read through the account of others, alleged or potential victims. Because if they have, you've been tainted, right? And I'm not trying to make it hard on women, because I want to, or I think men should have, or these people who are abusers should have this ultimate protection. I'm saying that because it strengthens your case. And if men are going to jail on the basis of evidence that is tainted like this, that is wrong. Because if you were going to jail on the basis or being cancelled, dropped from your label, your career ruined, I'm talking about women now, for accusations that men could just go online and read each other's accounts of, what the said abuse, then you'd feel some kind of way, especially if you didn't do it, you know. Um, so yeah, that was her account, and I think it went into a lot more detail later, and you started seeing some more abuse. Now, this one I've read before, and I'm gonna say now, if you are triggered uh, um, by abuse or anything, or you need help, um, do try and look up some helplines. And this is really something that shouldn't happen to anybody. And if this happened to her and it's proven in a court of law that Marilyn Manson did any of this behavior, or all the worst aspects of what Ashley accused him of, then he needs to be, like, he should be a social pariah, and he's got everything he deserves. Still needs to be investigated. He's still innocent until proven guilty, but it doesn't look good. And I'm giving you a trigger warning for what this woman accuses him of. I am still going to play devil's advocate with some of what she says here, because I think some of what she says here, the way it's worded, is problematic. So I met Brian Warner, known as Marilyn Manson, backstage in October 2015. Right? I was 22 and he was 46, so she's over the age, right? She's she's into her 20s, okay? And he was 46. I still think, I don't know why a 46-year-old man is like really going after all these young women. I would hope that I wouldn't be somebody who would do that. Of course, if I'm 46 and I meet a 22-year-old who genuinely is an extraordinary woman, I think, wow, what a cool, intelligent, beautiful woman, then for sure pursue it. But in general, if it's like I'm just like, oh, I love a good 20-year-old, I think that's kind of weird to me. Maybe not to other men, but I find that very weird. So the first thing that he ever said to me was that he was going to bite me. Okay, so that's not surprising to me given the image of Marilyn Manson. Okay, so I just want to say that he's going to bite me. I don't know how serious that is. I've said things equal to that while I was in the club talking to a woman. That wasn't meant as an actual thing that I was going to do. It was just I was drinking. I was feeling a bit confident. I had what do you call it, like that kind of alcohol drunk courage, or something like they call it. I can't remember the exact phrase or collocation, but it's that this kind of courage that you get after you've had a few. So I said some things, and I've ended up going back with those women and had a perfectly nice time, and nothing happened. We laughed about it after. It was just like a joke or something like that, right? You're going to bite me, right? We talked. So this isn't. I don't know if this is worth mentioning in the account, given the gravity of what she's going to say later that he did. We talked while the opening band played, and after the show, he invited me on his tour bus. He immediately love bombed me. I have a huge problem with this language. Love bomb me. I don't know what that means. I think we should be very careful with language. I think even if that means something in, millennial vernacular. I think it's very important because those things can be interpreted gaslight, love bomb. I just don't think in a statement that could be used in a kind of legal case that you should be using language like that. I think you should be very clear. What does love bomb mean, right? Was he doing anything illegal? Was it inappropriate? Did you not like him love bombing you, or were you okay with it? And what exactly was the nature of this love bombing? What was actually happening? Okay. But I'll say that for this woman, Gabrielle, that she goes into a lot of detail later. Again, trigger warning, goes into a lot of detail, and good on her for going into that much detail later on. But I just want to say, pick up on things while we're reading it, to say this is what men sometimes feel uncomfortable with in these accounts. Like we're like, we look at something like that and we're like, what is she talking about, right? Telling me that he felt like he'd known me for years and I felt similarly. So she admits that she felt similar to him, that, that their first encounter was a pleasant one and she felt similar. She felt close to him. Okay, so that's good that she said that. Then she says, he offered me cocaine. He told me to take off my clothes and take a shower in front of him. Now, this again, I just want to stop very, very briefly and say, so he told me to take off all my clothes and take a shower in front of him. He asked for my number as I was getting ready to leave and invited me to the show to follow him that evening. Now, he offered me cocaine. Did you take it? Were you fine with it? Did you take cocaine before you'd met him? Was this the first time you'd taken cocaine? Did you feel incredible pressure? You have to elaborate on what that means and why you're telling me this information. Are you just trying to paint if you're just trying to paint a picture, you should say, before I get into the legal or illegal behavior by Marlyn Manson, I just want to paint a picture of how I got to this place, given that our relationship was consensual at first. So this is his way of, charming you into doing more and more deviant type behaviors. So he offered me cocaine, right? This is awful, right? Sorry. This is something that, was it just friendly? How did he offer you cocaine? He told me to take off my clothes. Did you want to take off your clothes? Did he what is the problem with him asking you to take off your clothes, right? Like, if you're in an intimate situation and he asks you, I don't see that as something worthy of mentioning here, because the problem with it is it can be used to sound a certain, to have negative connotations when it could be a completely innocent encounter, any of these things. And he asked me to take a shower in front of him. Now, this is all weird. This whole Harvey Weinstein showering business, I don't even, Seinfeld, comedian, talked about this. It's like, I don't even know what that means. There was another comedian, I can't remember his name, who was asking women, can I masturbate in front of you? And Seinfeld was just like, what is going on? What kind of men? Like, maybe I'm just a little bit like kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just not up with the new lingo, or the new kind of way of being. But what time in your mind do you think it's okay to talk or ask of a woman who you haven't kissed yet, you haven't been intimate with yet, if you can watch me masturbate? Like, I don't know where you get that idea, what kind of power trip you're on, that you think that's appropriate. But in any case, if he asked you to take a shower in front of him, were you okay with it? With the Harvey Weinstein case, it's clear, and it's so obvious with the Harvey Weinstein case, because I was saying Marlyn Manson is clearly attractive guy, especially to a certain segment of women. He's the I wouldn't go as far as Brad Pitt, but like, certainly of rock stars, he's at least you know, a Jake Gyllenhaal, right? Or he's someone even bigger than Jake Gyllenhaal. He is the bee's knees to some certain women, right? I'm using such old terminology, but to certain women, they do a lot, off the bat. Like they just like straight up, like, yeah, you want to have sex with me, Marilyn Manson? Of course, you just have sex with me. Like, yeah, that's fine. Are you sure? It would be like immediate, right? And I think a lot of, so when he asked her to have a shower in front of him, was she okay with that? Did she? I mean, was it just out of the blue? Like completely, was she shocked by this? Because she said he'd already been love bombing her, so she obviously understood that he was romantically interested in her. So I just clarity rather than using these kind of ways to make yourself, because she's taking herself out of the situation. She's not saying how she responded to any of this. She's just saying he did this to me and he did that to me. But that's something you do together. You know, taking cocaine or him asking you to take your clothes off. That's something you have a choice over. Him asking you because he hadn't brainwashed you by this point because he said this is the first night you met him. All right. So he asked for my number as I was getting ready to leave and invited me to his show the following evening. The second time we met, he broke a wine glass in the hotel room and demanded we make a blood pact together. Again, this is terrible and stupid. I'd say it's more stupid on Marilyn Manson's part. Why would you do this? I guess men back then, in celebrities, I think rock stars nowadays will think twice about asking a woman to do something like this, right? Why would you do that? Like, you're famous and you're going to risk your career by, because she may have said, fine, like, let's cut each other's hands and do a blood pact together. And, it's disgusting. It's STDs. It's, all of that kind of horrible stuff. But if you agree to do it, I'm not sure that it carries as much weight. Now, him pressuring you to do that's obviously very uncomfortable. But again, if you consented to do it, it's not as if, like, for instance, if someone was assaulting me, like punching me, right, punching me till I was unconscious, and could even kill me, right? And I kept saying, punch me, keep punching me. I don't care, keep punching me. I want you to hit me. I want you to keep hitting me. I could still turn around the next day and say that guy assaulted me, right? It doesn't matter if you consent to something like that. He is punching the shit out of you, and he's not allowed to do that. Plain and simple, right? So I can still accuse him of assault. I don't know if the assault would carry as much weight in the courts, like in terms of the punishment given, especially if it was on tape or something like that. But you can't ask somebody to do something that is harmful to you. But I don't know that this would fall under a sexual misconduct, for instance. I think perhaps this would fall under something like a reckless endangerment of somebody because they could be infected. You can get an STD. You can, but it's not necessarily a sexually, a sexual misconduct kind of thing. And in that sense, I would say something like this, you have to look at what is the threshold in past in Hollywood for being able to forgive figures. There's people like, Robert Downey Jr., who was frequently arrested, and I think certain people accused of drunk driving, for instance. That really puts somebody in danger, and they were able to come back and still continue to work and be celebrities. Like, they could have killed someone if luckily they were caught before something like that happened, and then they said they had a problem and they had to go to rehab and blah blah blah. And is that behavior worse than asking somebody to cut their hand and do a blood pact with you and that person agreeing to do it? I don't know if that's worse than driving a vehicle while drunk and potentially killing somebody. So if somebody can be forgiven for that, should their career be ended for an accusation like this? That would be my question about that, and I'll leave that open to you. But it's certainly not a good look, and it's very, very stupid, I think. And in this sense, I don't feel sorry for Marilyn Manson. If he was going around telling people to do this, even if he did none of the other stuff, he's an idiot for leaving himself vulnerable to this kind of stuff by doing that, knowing that, you know, you're around Marilyn Manson. If Marilyn Manson, like if I was 20 years old, I probably wouldn't have done it. I might have considered it, right? Well, I'm 20 years old, and Marilyn Manson is like going, oh, you know, let's cut our hands. I wouldn't have touched his hand or anything, but I would have, you know, done like a blood thing or whatever, like on my own, you know, put it on my hand and then touched it. But, like something like that, I may have done, made sure, you know, but just because what a weird, odd story that I did a blood pact with Marilyn Manson, that would be like, oh, whoa, cool, like rock and roll or whatever, right? I probably wouldn't have done it. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, you know, whatever. I could possibly figure of doing that. But he must have known that some people may have just been doing that because they're influenced by the power and magnetism of his charisma, you know, as a rock star, and they may have felt pressured into doing that when they really didn't want to do it. And one day they might regret it so much that they're going to say, turn around and throw this in your face, right? Even if they agreed to it at the time. I think it's highly, highly stupid if he was going around doing this, especially with his image, because it's so easy to believe that Marilyn Manson would do something like this. And for a 30, 40-year-old man not to have learned the basics of life like this, he was 46 at the time that he did this. Him not to know the you know, the Zeta basics or whatever, that is it worth it? Is it worth losing all my millions of dollars and you know, being sued in courts and losing all my, you know, all of the things that surrounding my fame, you know, my sponsorships, my record label? You want to do that just so that you can goof off and make a blood pact? You kind of have to say, well, whether you did the rest of the stuff or not, you know, it's terrible if they're accusing you, but you really left yourself open to it. You know, you have no one to blame but yourself. All right, so things went from 0 to 100 at full speed. Right. All right, this is where I think she begins to really open up the situation. In the beginning stages of our relationship, he worked a kind of magic on me. He sent me love songs, told me we were soulmates, and introduced me to his father. Okay, so she's really setting the scene of how he seduced her. We would stay up painting each other, taking Polaroids, and talking until the early hours of the morning. I became completely enmeshed in his world. One thing I want to say about this account: this is the most detailed account as far as I know. But having said that, this very, very detailed account really doesn't. I think it's by a woman named Gabrielle. So she doesn't say who she is, and I'm sure she just wants to protect her identity. But I hope that she's doubled this down with actually going to the police and, you know, really is going after him, you know, as a criminal charge, so that he can't do this to other women, right? Because just saying Gabrielle, they, you know, you don't even know who it is. You can't refer to it. You can't see if this is somebody had taken photographs with Marilyn Manson, so there's proof that this woman actually met him and isn't just somebody like making up this story. I think that's very important. You know, because there's this whole thing now, oh, women never lie. Well, women have been proven to lie, especially against, you know, something like Black or African American men. Women have been shown to lie on many occasions about being abused by African American men because maybe they were ashamed to sleep with an African American or a Black male, right? Something similar happened with with Mike Tyson, for instance. And Mike Tyson, for what he's accused of doing, should absolutely be cancelled from society, from, if true what Mike Tyson was accused of, he needs to not be endorsed or famous or anything. But I think people have allowed Mike Tyson to come back into society because really the accusations were absurd. When you look into the details of the accusations against Mike Tyson, they are full of holes, contradictions, biased judges, all of these kind of things. But technically speaking, what Mike Tyson did, he should be shunned from, or what Mike Tyson was accused of doing, he should have been shunned from society since he was guilty. He's a prime candidate for the accusation being something that should lead to complete, taking him out of society. But again, once you read into the case and look at the details, the thing becomes a little bit more shaky as to whether people were taking advantage of him because of who he is. So I became completely immersed in his world. He told me he loved me 2 weeks after we met. Good. He told me he loved me 2 weeks after we met and invited me to go on tour with him to Europe. I was in art school at the time, and he never left the country, but felt it was a rare opportunity. I never left the country, but it felt like the country, Europe. But I felt like it was a rare opportunity. I do not have fond memories of this tour, though, as things had gone downhill quickly. He would tie me up for the first of many times and rape me. Here we go. So this is awful. I want to just make very, very clear. And if this triggers anyone, I'm very, very sorry to have talked about this stuff. But this is where it gets serious. This is where you can't hide behind, because I was going to talk about the rest of the allegations against Marlyn Manson could be seen as, competing perceptions of an event, right? So Marlyn Manson had a perception of an event where he was consensually doing this with someone, right? So everything they've detailed in their accounts, it seems like he could have a competing perception of that event. And really, in his mind, he was just, maybe being a bit over the line or like in terms of over the line. When I say over the line, I mean like, being, a bit kinky or something like that, doing some certain things that were a little bit abnormal sexually. But essentially, he believed that they were consensual, that he was a mad rock star, and he has this image, and he was playing to this image, and these women liked him because of his image and knew exactly what they were getting into, right? This cannot, what Gabrielle accuses him of here cannot be down to a competing perception, where he had a perception of innocence and she was, uncomfortable later after having consented to this, but realized later that, she really didn't want to do this and that he really pressured her into it, right? Here we go. So he would tie me up for the first of many times, and rape me. I sobbed on the floor in the hotel room, and when I looked at him, he was smiling. He told me he knew that's how I loved him because of my reaction. He took naked photos of me without my permission while I was sleeping and tied up, and sent them to his friends. Now, what this woman needs to do is get those pictures from the friends. And I'm sure Marlyn Manson, now you've come out and on social media and said this, is probably going to all his friends and saying, look, she consented to me taking these pictures and whatever. Please delete the photos or whatever. But I think with the digital forensics these days, even if they deleted it, police could still get those phones that she's alleging he sent to his friends, demand those phones, and do a forensic investigation. I hope the police have already taken Marilyn Manson's phone and started doing a forensic investigation of his phones and his properties. I hope they've got a warrant so that they can do that. I think they should have enough for a warrant, given these accusations by multiple women by now. So those pictures are key to proving this woman's statement. Not only will the pictures show that she's telling the truth, that he did take pictures of her while tied up. Now, she could have consented to that. But I think you'll be able to look at the expression on her face, how she looks. Is she not giving a sexy pose? Does she look upset? Does she look distressed? To be able to make some informed decisions about what kind of state of mind this woman was in when this happened. Now, I don't know if she agreed to be tied up, but if at certain points she said stop, at certain points she was crying, those are clear signs to any normal individual that they should stop. I'm not into BDSM, so I don't know much, but I know this much. If the person is crying and sad, you stop. Even if they've said, even if they haven't specifically said no, you don't continue sleeping with someone or having sex with them when they're crying, right? Like tears of sadness and pain and suffering, right? So if he's done that, he's out of here. He's gone. And I don't care, about his music or his career or what happens to him. There's no defense for it. You get those pictures, it's done. It's game over, especially if she's, if you get those pictures, he's looking distressed and people can confirm that he was sending these pictures out to them. Yeah, this is bad. Because that's evidence that she just gave there. Real big time evidence. One night in London before he played, he would force me to take drugs with him, and this time it was more than my body could handle. I woke up on the tour bus with paramedics shining a flashlight, slapping my face while trying to make me throw up. The paramedics wanted to take me to the hospital and he refused. I don't know why the paramedics allowed for him to, he shouldn't be able to refuse paramedics taking her to hospital. She would have to agree, surely. Otherwise, the paramedics would be like, fuck you, Marilyn Manson, we're taking her to hospital. So I'm not clear what she means there. Did she agree? Did she feel pressure because she was worried about what he would do? And again, paramedics, that is really bad on paramedics. If paramedics did that, left her in that situation, then they are, when it was their advice that she should go to hospital, she shouldn't be allowed to refuse. And you should know that anyone who's talking on her behalf, refusing that she go to hospital, that there's something wrong there, and you should inform the police immediately and get them involved and take her to the hospital anyway. It doesn't matter what Marilyn Manson says. I don't care how rich this guy is. This is a young, vulnerable woman who's just had a drug overdose, right? Basically, she needs to be in hospital, right? That is a clear, I don't know how it got past the paramedics, and to be honest, she should sue the government or whatever paramedic picked her up there, because that was terrible if they did that. So I don't know what is meant by that. That seems suspicious to me. I'm not saying the paramedics did this, but it strikes me as suspicious. Why would paramedics? I know this because I've done training for taking police calls or anything like that. If you think somebody is in distress, and these are all the indicators they give you, and you're worried about their well-being with another person, you have every right to, beyond being threatened, like if they pull out a gun or something like that, then you can maybe like back off and just, go, "Oh, maybe I'm just going to back off and call the police," because you're not going to put your own safety, at risk. If they threaten you or some kind of violence or something like that, you go away, you call the police, you make sure that they get there, you tell them the urgency of the situation. But in general, you are told you don't leave them alone with a person who you suspect may be, abusing them. And this is a clear sign that he might be abusing you. You say she should go to hospital. He says, "No, I don't think so." What does he know? He's Marilyn fucking Manson. You're a paramedic, right? So I don't know that paramedics would do that. So I'm either concerned about her account here, if that's strictly speaking true, or if this was a little kind of flourish she decided to put in to strengthen her case. But that does sound suspicious to me. Either the paramedics are incredibly incompetent, which happens a lot, or this isn't, strictly speaking, the full story. There's something else to the story. Like, she said, "No, I'm okay," da 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 da, and he was pressing her into, and he was saying, "Yeah, yeah, she's okay now," blah blah blah. But I don't know. That just sounds weird to me, that they would just leave her like that. But having said that, the one night in London before he played, he would force feed me to take drugs. And this is the last thing. I'm going to do a part 3 to this because this is going on a bit long. He would force me to take drugs and with him, and this time it was more than my body could handle. Now, I need to know more about the nature of what she means by forcing me to take drugs, because taking drugs, there's peer pressure to take drugs, but you still have responsibility of your actions. You might have a dominant and submissive partner. The dominant partner tells the submissive partner to do something illegal, and he even pressures them a bit. But as soon as they do that illegal thing, it's on. They have some moral and legal responsibility over doing that illegal thing as well, like robbing a bank or murdering somebody or something. It can't just be like they say, "Oh, he forced me into it." How did he force you? Did he hold the knife, and force your hand into the person? Because if you did that action of your own free will, you have legal responsibility. So if he was like, "Oh, you've got to take drugs, you're such a bitch, you don't take these drugs, whatever," and then you go, "Oh God, I'm all right, I'll just take it then," and then you snort it yourself, that's you've got some responsibility there. It's not just him. Okay. Uh, that being said, it is very, very important to note that I think she clarifies this later on in her account. Uh, so I'm just saying, if she had have left it at this, force me to take drugs, I would take issue with what she means by how do you force somebody to take the drugs? Did he drop it in your mouth and keep feeding you it? Because that's force feeding drugs, right? And she will clarify this in later on in her account, which is good on her. So I'm going to leave it there. I think we've had a good discussion about these accusations so far, and I'm going to do a part 3 on this. But yeah, so thanks very much. Please like, subscribe, comment. It's really good if you give me some comments and feedback on the discussion. Where I may have got things wrong, where as a man I'm not looking at the full picture, that I'm missing something, that from a woman's perspective, I'm not being fair on on the victims or the alleged victims here, in the way that they're giving their account. Maybe I've missed something legally as well. So please, women especially, I really want to hear your feedback on am I being reasonable here, and if I'm basketball, then do let me know, because that's not my intention. Okay.